Chairman, for the sake of time, appreciate the opportunity to provide my statement, and we'll submit it for the record. I will tell you, I'll keep it for a minute. Great. It is, for the record, it is fascinating, compelling reading that if I were you would not go to sleep tonight till you've memorized it.
Yes, sir.
But that's just me. Yeah, that's just my view of it. So
And here I thought you were holding up my statement. I was just getting a compliment.
I may do that as well, Chairwoman.
All right, we'll both stay up all night reading.
Great. Well, thank you for being here today. My concern, I have three concerns. One is that the rosy economic assumptions included in the President's budget mask much higher deficits. That the budget that Congress rushed through yesterday, ignores the true the cost of the financial rescue plan. And then I've got a serious question about Treasury and the Special Inspector General's report from last week, and about how Treasury is not responding to it. The first concern, rosy economic assumptions. President's budget projects real GDP will decline by only 1.2% this year. The blue chip forecast dramatically different than that. This first quarter dramatically different than that. The end result is that we will end up with much higher deficits. So given the data that's now available today, would you agree that the administration's forecast for the year appears to be too optimistic?
Well, I will say we certainly did our forecast back in early January, and we absolutely, the economy did deteriorate after we did it, and most private forecasters also sort of downgraded their forecast. So I think it was right in the middle of the pack at the time it was done. By the time the budget came out, I think it was more optimistic than most. I have to say, I think we may ultimately be vindicated, quite honestly. I think what we are seeing in a lot of the forecasts as they are coming out is a real change. I mean, there is the sense that those glimmers of hope are starting to cause people to rethink some of their assumptions. We know, for example, the CBO forecast that came out in March was more like ours, at least in 2010, than had been originally. And so anyway, I think it is certainly possible that it will turn out to be completely correct. That said, we always do a mid-session review, and we will be doing another forecast in the next couple of months, and so we will make honest budget estimates based on our best estimate of where we think the economy is at this time.
I did get a chance to question Secretary Geithner about these forecasts. At the time, it appeared to be nowhere near the middle of the pack and very worrisome. I do agree with you that adjusting to the economy is important, and as the administration produces any new quarterly estimates, could you provide them to the committee? Because I think this really that budget assumption underlies and affects a whole lot of our problems within the budget. Second question. This morning, the Financial Times reported that International Monetary Fund estimates the U.S. taxpayer cost of the financial cleanup could be up to $1.9 trillion over the next 5 years. None of that is included in either the President's budget, well, $250 billion was included in his, and zero in the budget that we approved yesterday. So I think, how can Congress, how can the White House make informed decisions on budget priorities while ignoring a nearly $2 trillion cost over the next few years?
I think the important thing to say is there's incredible uncertainty about what it will take to heal the financial system and how much taxpayer money will be needed. So I think I would go again, it comes to, there is indeed a lot of uncertainty about what the economy is going to do. If the economy does grow more quickly, I think there is every reason to believe that the kind of actions we're taking will be enough to heal the financial system. It's just very hard to know. And the International Monetary Fund, I'd say, doesn't have, they're a very fine organization, but whether they have really good estimates of exactly what the cost is going to be, I think is is highly questionable. I think the real thing is there's just a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and that was why the president put the placeholder in the budget, was to say we think we have enough now, we have a plan for using what we have now, but we wanted to signal in case we needed more to have the honest budgeting.
I would agree there is a great deal of uncertainty around all these unprecedented actions, but even if the IMF was off by 50%, we're at $1 trillion hole there. And and maybe you do know, are there any estimates, credible estimates, that say there will be zero cost to taxpayers over the next 5 years?
Well, we certainly know, right? We've already, right, the original TARP funds, right? We've had the $700 billion, and the question's going to be what fraction of those turn into be losses, and what fraction does the government get paid back? So we certainly have to think about those. I think there are absolutely credible estimates that have to do with how fast the economy grows. All of those, I think, something like the IMF. There's so much reliance on historical estimates. So what these studies are typically based on is other countries that have had these problems. This is what it's cost in terms of GDP. But one of the things that fails to take into account, obviously, is differences in the size across these episodes, but also differences in the policy response, right? I mentioned in my testimony, we've never had a countercyclical fiscal action this bold before, right? And I think it's very likely that it may be an important part of turning around the economy and making, as I said in response to one of my earlier questions, making the financial rescue less costly, easier to do.
One thing I appreciate about the IMF report was they didn't look just at the bailout. They looked at all the bank, the direct support, the bank funding guarantees, and the non-standard central bank loans, all of which are, as you said, very uncertain, much of it unprecedented. And I just think this is a credible organization. They raise an issue that is worrying a lot of people, a lot of lawmakers these days. And I think we'd be better to err on the side of caution in putting those dollars in the budget rather than ignoring it completely. Final question deals with the TARP and the public-private investment funds that are really key to the administration's efforts to deal with the toxic loans that are on the books today. Last week, this committee had the Special Inspector General, Neil Borofsky, in. He told us a couple things that were very troubling. One is that he believes that many aspects of the public-private investment program could make it inherently vulnerable to fraud, waste, and abuse, and he has made recommendations to the Treasury how to stop these vulnerabilities before they become a problem. And then he also, in his report, recommended that all TARP recipients account for the use of their funds, set up internal controls to comply with such accounting, and certify compliance. And he told this committee that the administration to date has not accepted either the recommendations on accountability for TARP or the recommendations to accept just basic safeguards. Do you know why Treasury would not accept those independent recommendations, or is there a timetable that you could give us when we will have assurances? Because building on rosy economic assumptions, ignoring the costs of the financial rescue plan, then adding on top of that more taxpayer risks within the bailout, all three become a pattern, and I think it would build confidence in the program and confidence on Capitol Hill if Treasury were to begin accepting some of those basic safeguards.
All right, so in your specific question, I'm going to have to get back to you because I don't know what a timetable is. But what I can tell you is, from the president right on down, the emphasis on accountability and transparency in the recovery actions, in the financial rescue, have been unprecedented. I know that is a top priority for the president. So I will certainly mention it to the Secretary of the Treasury and try to get you more information because, I know, and certainly in our design of the public-private investment program, we obviously don't want to have any chance of fraud. Nothing would be worse for the program, worse for the Treasury, and so figuring out what we can do to prevent that will be a top priority.
If you would do that, and I think it's important, this is a bipartisan issue.
Absolutely.
We were not pleased with accountability in the Bush administration on the TARP funds, not pleased or satisfied with accountability so far in the new administration and with the public-private investment vehicle. Why not stop those abuses before they occur? Please deliver that message to the Treasury Secretary.
I will.
Great.
Right
Thank you.
after I
Thank you.
memorize your report,
No,
I will
don't do
do
that.
that
But
one.
thank you, Madam Chairman, for being
Sure.
here today. So, Chairman.